The more and more fat we eat, the more and more trouble we put onto our liver. Our liver has to produce bile with the fat we're eating. So when you're having all your steaks and all your sauces and your butters, and you're having all your seafood and butter and lobster and all your cream on top of your potatoes and cheese on top of your potatoes and your steak, when you're having all that fat every single day, you might eventually get a problem with your gallbladder because the liver is overburdened and it's pushing up so much bile into the gallbladder. And when your gallbladder is filled with sediment and toxins, and then it gets these upsurges constantly from the liver, where your liver's sending all these bile reserves up into that gallbladder, you start to put the gallbladder under stress. And when that gallbladder is under stress, it can spasm. And that's one reason why when people eat really high fatty foods, or they eat high fatty foods in a restaurant, they start getting pains in their gallbladder. As we go through life, we don't think about our gallbladder until one day our gallbladder tells us to think about it when we have a problem. Why does our gallbladders have problems? They have problems because they build up all this toxic sludge in here. Where does the sludge come from? It comes from the liver. How does it get into the liver? It comes from the intestinal tract and drives up into the liver. Often we eat a lot of foods, and as we eat all these different kinds of foods, we end up weighing down our gallbladder because our gallbladder keeps on building up with more toxic sludge. What that means is our liver has already been getting filled up, so filled up with sludge that it's starting to send it into the gallbladder. And then we get gallbladder spasms. And that's when the gallbladder says, hey, we got a problem. We need to do something about it. We're going into gallbladder spasms. And that's one reason why we have a problem with our gallbladder. People out there that are like, I want to do a gallbladder flush. I want to take care of my gallbladder. I got gallstones. I'm worried about gallbladder problems. And then what they don't realize is they got liver problems. They had liver problems first, not gallbladder problems first. They had liver problems first. So what happens is when your bile reserves are low, stagnant, sluggish, and dirty, and filled with trash and garbage, and then weak, it goes into the gallbladder and doesn't come out easy. And then the gallbladder gets fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter. The gallbladder gets heavier and heavier and becomes a sack of mud, a sack of stones, a sack of sand. So a lot of people walk around and they got basically a sack of stones and sand inside their gallbladder. It's just this little sack that's filled up. And how did it get like that? Because bile was weak for a long time. Most people walking around have low bile reserves. What that means is their liver's not producing enough bile to break down the fats. Bile breaks down a lot of different aspects of the food, but fat is one of the number one things that the bile actually does. But our bile is low. For most people walking around, we have low bile. And what happens is food rots in the gut when you have reduced bile levels inside your liver. Bile that's not potent, it's not strong. One problem that happens when your bile is not potent and strong is that it's not doing its job when it goes up the bile duct, when it gets into the gallbladder. Our gallbladders start getting wasted. They start becoming a trash compound. They start becoming a trash dump. And when our gallbladder becomes a trash dump and it can't be cleaned out, we get in trouble. Then we get the gallstones. Then we get the sand in the gallbladder. Then we get all the different gallbladder spasms and problems. A lot of people have to have their gallbladders removed. When our livers are stagnant and sluggish from all the toxins and poisons building up inside of them, something occurs. All that toxic waste eventually goes up into our gallbladder. Now, when it goes up into our gallbladder, it goes up into our gallbladder hot. The liver's hotter than the gallbladder. The gallbladder's cooler than the liver. When that toxic sludge ends up inside the gallbladder, it starts to cool down, and when it cools down, it forges into stones, gallstones, gallbladder stones. And over time, we get enough gallbladder stones forging inside the gallbladder to the point where the gallbladder becomes heavy and you have a sack of rocks. Some rocks are smaller, some rocks are bigger. Some rocks are made out of protein, some rocks are made out of calcium, depending on what we're doing in our diet too. If we're doing a lot of vinegar, a lot of caffeine, it's going to be calcium stones inside your gallbladder. Eventually, a problem happens and we need our gallbladder out. When our HCl, our hydrochloric acid, weakens inside our stomach, we can have a problem. One of those problems is we don't knock down bacteria that's bad, pathogens. So what happens is your HCl, one of its jobs is to actually kill off pathogens that enter into the intestinal tract. Okay? If we don't kill off those pathogens naturally with their hydrochloric acid that our stomach produces, they eventually find their way inside the liver and eventually find their way inside the gallbladder. When we have pathogens inside the gallbladder, the duct can get inflamed. We can get a gallbladder that goes toxic. And when it goes toxic, it becomes swollen and inflamed and eventually needs to come out.